Tell me about growing up during the Civil Rights Movement.
Well, during the Civil Rights Movement, I was born in '57, and at that time it didn't really matter that much to me because I wasn't affected as much as my parents were. So I grew up during a time when Dr. King was a young preacher, and Jim Crow had been in effect, and a lot of other laws like white only or colored only, or you were considered colored. And I was oblivious because I was a child, and my father rather was a construction. Uh, he owned his own business, and he was doing quite well. So I didn't feel it, but my parents felt it. However, I did see a lot of things that came out of the civil rights movement.
So, do you remember any sort of stories that your parents told you about any type of segregation?
Yes, I do. I remember my mother. My mother was more affected, I would think, than my father. She was a lot more anxious. He would speak about the men that had been hung by what do you call them, the street lights, the telephone pole in Omaha, Nebraska. She would talk about the segregation and racism and the Jim Crow in Mississippi. My father didn't talk about it much, but my mother seemed to be a lot more affected by the fear and the trauma of it than my father.
Sounds terrible. Um, Tell me about the famous incident when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat for a white man.
Oh, yeah. When that happened, again, I was a little girl. I only heard about it that this lady refused to give up her seat, and she was more or less my mother's age. She would have been uh, my mother in my um, aunt's age. But they would tell me about the lady who she was like a hero, a folk hero. She just refused to get up. She had been working all day and she sat down. And back then, you had to, if you were, as they use the word Black American or a person of color, they call you colored because we were all so many different hues. They couldn't give us one color, so they called us colored. But at any rate, if you were white and if a white person got on, whether black or I'm sorry, whether male or female, then you had to give up your seat to that person. And Rosa Parks worked all day, and a white guy got on and was like, he didn't really say, "Excuse me, ma'am." He just kind of looked at her because that's the way it was, and she just, and I don't blame her, felt I'm not getting up. And they called the police on her to escort her off the bus, and that she didn't know that when she refused to, or rather when she sat down, we were able to all stand up, so to speak, was the coin phrase. When Rosa Parks sat down, uh, African Americans or people of color, not just African Americans, were able to stand up. Yeah.
Um, did you see the faces of well-known American activists on TV a lot?
Yes, you did. It was TV was black and white, and it was quite interruptive. I was more concerned with Captain Kangaroo and Popeye at that time, but you would see the news. I think we had about two channels at that time. TV probably went off at 7 or dinner time. But yeah, it was very prominent the faces of Dr. King and his constant feel like I would say a Georgia and Alabama draw, but he was very articulate and his face was more prominent than any other face. Although there was a Malcolm X, I he apparently was shot sometime before King, and the news or the media was able to make him look more less like a criminal instead of an activist, instead of a hero. So they were able to slander his name, so people didn't follow him as much as they did the well dressed and articulate King because King spoke more of no violence, whereas Malcolm X was by means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't violent either. They just took the lesser of the two evils, and they felt if you're gonna follow anybody, please let it be king. Um, they didn't want people, you know, white people at that time getting their skulls bashed in by um, blacks retaliating or people of color retaliating in the manner in which they had gone on to take things at the rate that they did with a lot of violence.
So I know you talked about Malcolm's death, but do you remember the death of Martin Luther King?
Over and over and over, it was a time of fear. Back then, we had um, just an awful time of fear. I can remember back to Omaha, Nebraska when Kennedy got shot during the time of the civil rights movement. It was on TV, awful enough. And here we have Dr. King being shot. He didn't get shot on TV, but it was all over the news. And it was like first Kennedy, then Bobby, then of course before that it was Malcolm and now King. And it was like one after another. But yes, I do remember coming home from school. I must have been in the third grade, and I just remember it was in '68. He got shot, and I remember the funeral. I remember seeing Coretta Scott King with her veil draped over her face, looking a lot like my mother with her daughter, who was Bernice King, who's roughly my age now, laying her head on her mother's lap and sucking her hand, and the other children in tow. And she held her poise together so well. I remember it just being splattered on the TV over and over and over and over, just branded in a line.
What was the aftermath aftermath of the death like of Martin Luther's and Malcolm's?
I don't remember much about Malcolm's death because when he got shot, it must have been, well, was it before Kennedy? Because I remember, no, it had to have been after Kennedy, but it's like they didn't make that much of a big deal. When Kennedy got shot, Malcolm made a statement of something about the chickens coming home to roost and the violence that most of the Caucasian and the political activists had created an air of such hostility that what he was meaning, the chickens coming home to roost, is that the hostility that you took to other communities are now coming home to yours by shooting your own president. And then he was shot. And they didn't make much of a big deal, so I don't remember it much, but I do remember when King was shot. It just seemed like another time of hysteria. And I believe people rioted there. They took to the streets and they rioted. I don't remember much in front of my house, but I do know in areas like Five Points in Colorado, um, they rioted. And I do remember as a little girl, when King marched, we marched, our church marched. Even though we didn't march to uh, the nation's capital, we marched to our own state capital and held hands and sang "We Shall Overcome" in the bitter cold. And as little kids, you know, I didn't appreciate it. I just not at all. I couldn't understand. I remember just being hoisted up on someone's shoulder and wondering when it was all going to end, when we were going to get to go home.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that what they were fighting for so vehemently and so bitterly and so earnestly would make a difference when getting a college education years to come. I didn't know that if they didn't do what they did, I would not be able to go to school. I would not enjoy the luxury of being able to go inside a restaurant without being chased out or being able to go sit down on a bus. And I wouldn't have known any of those things. As it was, I was oblivious to those things, but I wouldn't have known what it was like not to have that kind of privilege.
Did the media address the riots and marches?
Oh yeah, they talked about watts. 100, I think it was 180 watts.